It was Karl Marx who said that religion is the opium of the poor. Religion has been historically used as a means to systematically oppress, suppress, and take control of resources by the elite, from the poor. And please don't confuse it with spirituality. Now, as a reverend, I'll focus on Christianity, but Islam and traditional beliefs do certainly take their share here. I am a reverend. Okay, and why would I speak so critically of religion? Well, let me tell you a few things about myself first. I'm a born-again Christian. I'm spirit-filled, tongue-speaking. I'm charismatic. So that gives you an idea of where I stand. 23 years been saved. 17 of those years, a minister of the gospel. Sat under some of the most amazing human beings. But also starred under some very interesting people. I learned something very interesting. In that period, I learned that several people within religious institutions aren't really about shepherding, grounding, discipline, and releasing more. But more about manipulation, control, and selfish gain. But I think the biggest lesson that I learned, it's just how religion, and I use that word, religion, shackles people to personalities and institutions. I learned a very bitter truth, and here's our truth. Religion is the #1 tool for mind control. From the elite. For the ordinary. Now there are 3 distinct ways, the sort of 5 distinct ways that this happens. Now before I do so, I have to give some credit to something. Most people, especially me, a Christian, know Jesus Christ, that's who we follow. What is amazing is that Jesus Christ was perhaps one of the most anti-religious people I ever came across. Jesus throughout his life on earth preached the kingdom, not institutions. He was so religious that in Matthew chapter 23 in the Bible you get entire the scathing attack against the religious leaders of the day, so scathing that is sealed his fate, death by crucifixion. Let's ask ourselves this question exactly. How has the ruling class used religion to oppress and suppress? So let's walk you through 5 key ways that I've learned. The first one is that they've used it as a means of control. Okay, so religion has been used throughout history to ensure that the elite can take control of the simple, and they've done this in 3 very specific ways. The first is to push the concept of martyrdom. And what's that? That's the idea that you go out there and you do all you can, including dying if possible, for your religious agenda. What's so interesting is that this is done for leaders. But the saddest part, though, is that some people are so fervent about this that they go as far as blowing up people, as we know very well through the antics of Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab. The second method is the suffering model. Okay, pie in the sky life will be good for you when you get in the kingdom of the hereafter. So suffer, suffer, suffer. The more you suffer, the whole year you are. The irony, as always, is that it's the disciples that suffer. The third one is that money is evil. And there are 2 badly misquoted scriptures that I use to exacerbate this. The first one, and you all know it. It is easier for a rich to thread a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. And the second one is just as badly misquoted. The love of money is the root of all evil. Ladies and gentlemen, those 2 statements have done more harm towards wealth creation and the concept of health and wealth in Africa. Global Finance Magazine, 2020 figures. Of the 20th poorest countries in the world, 16 are in Africa. 16. Let me just think about that. Ask any African. We pray the most. We fast the most. We're the most fervent religious people I know. And yet all the poverty. So does that mean prayer doesn't work? Of course, it does. What I need to do is point you to countries that are religious but very rich: the USA, the United Arab Emirates. So if there are countries that are rich yet there are people that are poor like us, something is wrong. Anyway, let's get back to our list, shall we? At number 4, or is it number 2? Let's go with number 2, cause that was number 1, so number 2 is the justification of kingdoms and empires. There's a reason, ladies and gentlemen, YHS? You have castles. You have king, queen, and bishop in the night. You see, no good top person can justify political control than a religious person. And so throughout history religion has justified the elite. They call them the noble, they call them the blue blood. And if you bring it close to home, they are called the anointed. Third is slavery, and it's one of the darkest chapters in the history of mankind. I mean, for a period. A group of people came, forced religious Christianity on another group, and then captured and enslaved them, shipped them across the Atlantic as slaves. And to justify all this, they say the Bible justifies this. Slaves, black people are inferior and white people are superior, and it took centuries before abolitionists and human rights activists came round to fight this revulsive behavior, but that's not before. The toll had been done. And here's the big deal. This whole scene of slavery set the tone for the fourth factor, colonialism. I'll be honest with every one of us here, colonialism was the back end of Christianity. See, when the missionaries were sent over, those that sent the missionaries had an agenda. They called it the 3 C's. They came over, but here's something very interesting. As they began to do their work, they brought a very powerful an image of a white Jesus. Blonde hair, blue eyes. Man, I looked just like the missionaries. I mean, and I'll be honest with you, it was powerful. It worked. To make matters worse, they took our names and said, "Ah, these are pagan demonic names. You better get Christian names." What's interesting, you'll see, is that the Christian names were nothing but English names or French names or Portuguese names. They were not Christian. As if that wasn't enough ethnic groups, they divided us by the color of our skin. At the top of the food chain were the whites. And then followed the Indians. And then followed the coloreds, and right at the bottom were the blacks. But you see, the worst was yet to come, which is my 5th point, white supremacy. Do you know what is sad? Is that white supremacy had its greatest advocate in religious Christianity. Was religious Christianity that pushed the concept and idea that whites are supreme and superior to blacks. Truth is that religious Christianity was used as a Trojan horse to hide this very evil seed. And of course, don't forget the linguistic terms like white is good, black is bad, whitelisted, blacklisted, white market, black market. Throw in a good chunk of slavery, apartheid, Jim Crow laws. Justified again by the Bible. And then this was enforced by the use of lynching, killing, disenfranchisement of black people, inferior education, inferior opportunities, and what that God did were essentially kept the black people and slaves through conditioning. And bear in mind, this took centuries. The seed that was further sown, which is so evil also, was the use of linguistics, language words. I apologize in advance cause this is TED, but I have to use this word. One good example of the use of words, caricature terminologies, is the word. The word and all its related terms were used to further enforce the idea of the inferiority of a black man. You can take some time and go visit the Ferris State University Jim Crow Museum of Racist Memorabilia and learn for yourself just how harmful it was. The irony, ladies and gentlemen, are that these very terms have become the reality today. And so therefore lies the proof in what I've just said. Blacks now believe this. Cursed and so inferior. But the only way they can measure up is by looking like the very oppressor that brought them down, and skin bleaching is a good example. Another one is the use of the word Husum, Garv Azami, Oma Buena, which you know, mean white man or big boss, and those, by the way, are terms used for fellow blacks that are seen to be progressing. Let me illustrate with a real example. I have a friend of mine who got a very good contract recently, a deal where he was going to distribute a particular product across a chain, and so he put together a deal, prepared some presentation, got all his details, went and pitched. Unfortunately, despite meeting all the conditionalities, his deal was turned down. He had some insight. So what did he do? He called his partners in South Africa, who were white by the way, haha. And have them come over. And then they pitched with him. No insight. I think you know what happened. Let's just say that he has the deal now. His deal and his business are everywhere. But here's the sobering part. The people he spoke to and pitched were indigenous African blacks like you and me. Today we have seen that many Africans are now at a stage because of all this conditioning. I've said that we're just about to exchange for another new kid on the block. The Chinese? So what are we doing? What's the solution? How do we come out of all this? Well, my solutions are not going to be fun, but these are good ideas worth spreading. So number 1, we need to unshackle ourselves from the mental chains of religious dogma and mind control. Which is really what religion is about. Freedom of the truth must be a substitute. Further, we must stop following rules and regulations, rituals, and get to the liberty of the truth. Furthermore, we must discuss, there's so much distance in religious ceremonies and procedures worsened by mediators with selfish motives. We need to eliminate that distance. We need to get to a place where we know the Creator in person and know the truth in Him. And when that happens, it leads to an epiphany of clarity of purpose and destiny. Listen, it's spirituality centered within. That's the key, not just a dissented without around institutions and people. But here's my big thing. We need a mindset change, and no, it's not just a phrase, because mindset change paradigms are a big thing nowadays. But no. I'm talking about serious reprogramming. Lastly, we need empowerment. And that empowerment comes from empowering education. Something that's really about releasing people into destiny. Not keeping them subservient to an institution forever and ever till kingdom come. I'm going to end with this by saying that you all know. It says, give a man fish, and you feed him for a day. But teach the man to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. For life. But you know something? I want us to be disruptive. Completely forget about teaching the man to fish. Here's the deal, empower the man to own the lake. And you feed him for generations after him. Ladies and gentlemen, Africans must learn the empowering truth and will no longer be in severe of religion and its impoverishing hold. But instead, we'll see wealth for all citizens of this very rich continent. I thank you. There is nothing new under the sun. Truth is eternal. It has always been here and it always will be here. The problem is that the government-controlled mainstream media wants us to associate that which is new, or the news in other words, with that which is true, and as we all should know by this point in time, nothing could be further from the truth. The news isn't telling us what is true, it is just presenting that which is quote-unquote new to us. So want to latch onto the new stuff. This is a mind control technique. Okay, it doesn't matter whether something is new or not, or whether it's been around for eternity. All that matters is whether it is true. What we are in the midst of right now, at this point in human history, is a socially engineered perceived crisis. See, the crisis that we are in is highly orchestrated and it's, managed large scale. Then it's designed to steer the mental perceptions of large amounts of the population in a specific direction, which is specifically dictated by the social engineers of our world. In other words, the ruling class of our world, the mind controllers of our world, the dark oak opus of our world. This is a perception management crisis. This crisis of perception is designed to create fear, trauma, cowardice in action, mistrust, and that is because people still tune into the talking heads on the mainstream media. They still are listening to what so-called experts have to say, and believing and hanging on to their every word as truth, and they're falling into a consciousness of fear and division as a result. Nothing has changed in the last several decades, really the last several centuries or several million. People are still easily led and easily mind controlled by the social engineer ruling class. So the mainstream media, they're telling people whatever the ruling class wants them to think and believe. And it's working beautifully because consciousness has still not evolved to a level of understanding that these people are paid liars and they are trying to steer human consciousness in the direction that the ruling class wants it to go. But the media is doing its job of instilling fear into the human population. A small percentage of people aren't buying it, and they are trying to put out an alternative narrative. And then, as a result, the ruling class is trying to block that narrative from being understood by the majority of people. The majority of people are television watchers. They're still tuning into the mainstream nightly news for their information and government websites for their related websites for their information, and unfortunately, that means that most of them are buying into this perceived crisis. This perceived managed socially engineered crisis. We have to disconnect from that mainstream information and take information in from a wide and eclectic variety of sources before concluding what is taking place and by applying a truth discovery methodology, namely the trivium, to understand what's real be happening. Most people aren't doing that, they're acting from a place of belief. My question to the viewing audience to help you guys who are mostly awake to what is taking place, I want you to understand what your work is to do, and most people still really don't understand what your great work is to do. It isn't just to absorb information. It's to understand how many asleep people there are out there and go to work on trying to wake them up by putting information out into the world. Far too few people are doing that. How many people in the world still completely believe the official government and mainstream media narrative? I say it's far upwards of over 95% of the population. Why? Why is that? It's because we, as allegedly conscious people, aren't doing the work that we are here to do. And sadly most people haven't transitioned from a place of knowledge into a place of right action. Applying that knowledge in the right way, that's what great work is. To do, folks, and more people have to understand that that's what the great work is and start doing it. Not just talking about, I'm awake or I know what's going on, and just being satisfied with the knowledge that you have. But transitioning that into right action through teaching others, not just shying away and saying, oh, you have your perspective. You have to put the word out there. The universe is spoken into existence. Or we speak the truth out into the world. The more the reality around us will change because people's behavior is based upon their perception. And if we start to inform their perception, their behavior will change for the better and the world will change for the better. As a result, that's how our reality collectively, in the aggregate, is actually built. These people are in a cult. Stop sugarcoating the words. It's not just their perspective, it's a managed perspective that is socially engineered to drive behavior in a certain direction by the dark occultist who rules our society. That is the definition of inculcating people into a cult. Belief systems, and most of them are right there. And here are the characteristics of their mindset. Blind belief, without verification through a real truth discovery methodology. They listen to the news. They listen to the government narrative. They listen to the mainstream media narrative and they accept it on blind faith. They have no first-hand knowledge, whether scientifically or with the life experience of anything that is happening, they simply accept what is being told to them. They have no actual skepticism of quote-unquote officials and quote-unquote experts. They'll say that they're skeptical people, but nothing could be further from the truth. They are true believers because if an official says it or an expert says it will, then it absolutely must be true. And it doesn't require the application of my skepticism or actual independent research. I could just accept it on my blind faith. And the final characteristic of this mind set non-believers of their cult belief system must be shamed. Those who don't accept their worldview and don't accept their version of the narrative that is being pushed off onto us by the mainstream media. They have to be shamed and have their rights taken away, and it's time for us to speak up about this and say we're not going to accept it. Another part of these true believers' mindset is the belief in a superior class. They believe that the dogmatic experts are telling us what we must believe and that we have no other choice to believe this narrative or comprise a superior class of human beings to the average person. They are the mainstream media, the governors and government agents, and people you know, in positions of power. And then so-called experts and pundits you know from non-governmental organizations. They don't even have true, experience in any fields of research that they are alleged that they have. But see, this isn't just believing in a superior class. Ladies and gentlemen, what it is. It's a belief in a master class, that's really what it is. Let's not mince words and give euphemisms even. It's not just that they think these people are superior to other people. It's they think that there are masters. That's what this worldview is all about. They believe that the master class has the quote-unquote right to command others. This is part of this cult mentality. Imagine people like the governors of different states in the United States believing that they are commanders. Our governors are controllers that they can dictate by their voice alone and the stroke of a pen. What people may or may not do in their own lives, imagine. They think they're kings and rulers and masters of other people, and people believe this claim. It's called an authority in government. It's the belief that the master class has the right to command others. See what people the logical fallacy that the average human being makes, and even some people in the so-called alleged freedom movement. It's no such thing as the freedom movement. They believe in this thing called authority, but they never actually take a step back and apply the behavior in question to themselves. This is what you have to do. Take a step back and apply the behavior in question, namely the right to command other people. The right to rule others, the right to dictate to others, to yourself. Imagine, do you believe you have that right to go out? Command others what they may do in their lives regardless of what health condition may be present or not. You believe you are the commander and ruler of other people. If you're being honest with yourself, you don't think you're the ruler or commander of others. Well, then how did other people get that right? If no one themselves, as an individual, has it, and it is true. No one has that right when we want to look at it, get down to the bottom level of it. The problem is, people's ego is in the way of understanding this. They don't want to admit that they were wrong. They don't want to admit that they were duped, and that's what the force of the out-of-control ego is. It's people's hardened ego and their rigid dogmatic belief system block them from seeing, hearing and understanding, and acknowledging the truth that no one has the right to command others. You apply the behavior to yourself. This belief that a master class has the right to rule and command others, and inevitably, if you are being honest with yourself, you will come to the conclusion. The version that ultimately there is no such right. No one has the right to command others. No one, as an individual, has a right to command others, so this right cannot be granted to or delegated to anyone else in the world. That makes the whole concept of government become instantly illegitimate, morally illegitimate on its face. There is no such thing as the moral right to rule or command others, and anybody who thinks that there is such a right is under an illusion of a diseased mind. And their mind is sick, and they're under a religious cult illusion. And that is how we have to say it to them. People don't want to hear that, but it's irrelevant whether they don't want to hear it. We have the right to speak it because it is the truth. There is no such thing as the right to command the problem. Are they trying to reverse it and say we don't have the right to challenge that through our speech?